Boeing delivered only 14 aircraft in June 2024, an astonishing 95% drop compared to the 304 jets it handed over in the same month the year before. Around that time, a Brazilian airline that had relied exclusively on American and European models for decades announced a dramatic shift. Total Airlines revealed it would acquire 4 C919 jets from the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, a deal worth about $360 million. The news sent shockwaves through an industry historically dominated by two giants, Boeing and Airbus. It signaled something unprecedented. Total Airlines was poised to become the first carrier in South America, and possibly the first outside Asia, to purchase China's domestically developed large airliner. The Brazilian company was blunt about its reasoning. In its announcement, it openly stated that it had to look beyond its traditional suppliers. Something in the global aviation landscape had fundamentally changed, and the fractures were becoming difficult to ignore. The timing reveals the broader context. Around that time, a Brazilian airline that had relied exclusively on American and European models for decades announced a dramatic shift. Total Airlines revealed it would acquire 4 C919 jets from the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, a deal worth about $360 million. The news sent shockwaves through an industry historically dominated by two giants, Boeing and Airbus. It signaled something unprecedented. Total Airlines was poised to become the first carrier in South America, and possibly the first outside Asia, to purchase China's domestically developed large airliner. The Brazilian company was blunt about its reasoning. In its announcement, it openly stated that it had to look beyond its traditional suppliers. Something in the global aviation landscape had fundamentally changed, and the fractures were becoming difficult to ignore. The timing reveals the broader context. For more than 100 years, Boeing stood as a pillar of aviation excellence, its engineering legacy nearly unmatched. But beginning in 2018, that legacy began to unravel. Two newly built 737 MAX aircraft crashed within 5 months, one in Indonesia, the other in Ethiopia, killing everyone on board. Investigations exposed fatal design oversights and failures in regulatory oversight. The entire global fleet of 737 MAX aircraft was grounded, costing Boeing billions and shattering trust in its quality standards. When the MAX finally returned to service in January 2023, observers hoped Boeing had resolved its issues. But that hope evaporated quickly. Throughout 2024, a string of alarming incidents emerged. Cabin door panels blowing off, engine cowlings breaking loose, hydraulic failures. Each event made international headlines and solidified a growing belief that Boeing had lost mastery over its own manufacturing. The data reinforced this grim picture. In the first half of 2024, Boeing booked only 156 orders, a collapse of nearly 70% compared to the same period the year before. And June's pitiful output of 14 aircraft was widely interpreted as a near-total rejection by the market. At first glance, Airbus appeared positioned to capitalize on Boeing's troubles. The European manufacturer secured 2,094 orders in 2023, destroying its previous record of 1,503 set a decade earlier. Deliveries hit 735 units, surpassing its goal of 720. Airbus even announced plans to increase monthly output to 75 aircraft, an aggressive move aimed at capturing the majority share of a market that typically needs around 120 new jets every month. But Airbus faced its own limitations. Even with expansion efforts, its global production footprint remains small, with just 10 assembly lines. Supply chain delays and shortages of key components slowed production. The company simply couldn't absorb all the demand displaced from Boeing. Delivery schedules stretched out for years. Airlines needing aircraft within specific windows found themselves stuck. Brazilian carriers experienced this problem firsthand. When they approached Airbus for new aircraft, they encountered constrained manufacturing capacity, stretched supply chains, and delivery dates pushed far into the future. Airbus was forced to decline orders it couldn't reasonably fulfill. The result was a sudden opening, a gap between global demand and available supply. Into that void stepped China's C919. Brazil is home to Embraer, one of the most respected regional jet manufacturers in the world. Embraer excels at building smaller aircraft like the E-Jet family, seating roughly 70 to 130 passengers. But the company has intentionally avoided the large, single-aisle market, jets carrying 150 to 200 passengers, where Boeing and Airbus dominate. The enormous capital investment and fierce competition kept Embraer focused on regional aviation. As a result, Brazilian airlines have always relied on Boeing or Airbus for their mainline fleets. Until now. When Total Airlines announced its intention to acquire the C919 in September 2024, analysts immediately recognized the significance. The order itself, 4 aircraft valued at $360 million, may be modest, but its symbolism is enormous. It marks the first time any South American airline has seriously pursued a Chinese-built large passenger jet. It suggests that the decades-long duopoly controlling global aviation may be beginning to fracture. Total Airlines, primarily a cargo and charter operator, explained its decision plainly. China promised delivery by March of the following year. Timing became the decisive factor. While several Asian carriers had been evaluating the aircraft for months, comparing specs and negotiating terms, Brazil acted first on the international stage. The company couldn't wait years for Airbus or roll the dice on Boeing's ongoing problems. They needed jets flying within months, and only China could meet that schedule. The financial structure of the deal highlights another element of China's strategy. According to industry reports, the China Development Bank offered to finance up to 80% of the purchase with repayment terms stretching 10 to 12 years. This isn't merely an aircraft sale, it's a bundled package of manufacturing, financing, and long-term support. For a carrier like Total, which operates on thin margins in a competitive region, these lending terms fundamentally change the economics of expansion. Low-interest Chinese financing significantly undercuts the cost of borrowing from Western institutions. Price also plays a major role. A Boeing 737 or Airbus A320, the direct competitors to the C919, typically costs between $110 million and $135 million depending on configuration. China lists the C919 at around $90 million. That $20 to $45 million difference per aircraft can reshape fleet planning for smaller airlines. Over a decade of operation, the savings from 4 aircraft accumulate into a massive cost advantage. For developing nations, this Brazilian move sends a clear signal: there are alternatives now. For decades, carriers in Africa, South America, and parts of Asia had to accept whatever pricing and terms Boeing or Airbus demanded. The C919 changes that equation. It's not marketed as a cutting-edge or luxury aircraft. It promises practical, cost-effective transportation that meets certification standards and safely moves passengers from point A to point B. Though still early in its global rollout, the C919's real-world performance has been strong. The jet entered commercial service on May 28, 2023, with China Eastern Airlines operating the inaugural passenger flight. In just over a year, C919s have accumulated more than 10,000 flight hours across roughly 3,700 commercial flights, transporting over 500,000 passengers. The safety record remains spotless: no major incidents, no emergency landings, no system failures that would trigger regulatory concerns for a new model. This operational track record is critical for foreign buyers. Airlines considering the C919 can now rely on real-world performance data instead of solely manufacturer claims or test flight figures. The jet has demonstrated it can handle daily commercial pressures, tight turnarounds, varied climates, different pilot techniques, and normal maintenance cycles. The C919's progress rests not only on competitive pricing or delivery speed, but on China's vast aerospace ecosystem, a network of research institutes, suppliers, engineers, and production centers built over decades with extensive state backing. While Western coverage often highlights that certain components come from international suppliers, the engines, for example, are produced by CFM International, a joint venture between GE and Safran. The overall integration, assembly, systems engineering, and refinement reflect China's growing technological ability. This industrial base gives China the ability to steadily support and upgrade the C919 program for decades to come, gradually increasing the share of homegrown components and reducing its reliance on foreign suppliers. Yet the C919 still confronts one major obstacle on its path to broader global adoption: airworthiness certification. Every country has its own aviation regulator that must authorize aircraft before they can fly within its borders. China's Civil Aviation Administration has approved the C919 for domestic service, but its Western counterparts, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency and the United States Federal Aviation Administration, have not. Without their certifications, the C919 cannot operate in Europe or the United States, immediately limiting its value for airlines that depend on transatlantic or trans-Pacific routes. Brazil's aviation regulator, ANAC, has stated publicly that it has not yet received a formal airworthiness application from COMAC. This creates an unusual scenario. Total Airlines is negotiating for aircraft that have not been officially approved for Brazilian airspace. The assumption seems to be that approval will come after the deal is in motion, which subtly pressures regulators to accelerate the process. It's a calculated bet by Total, banking that certification will be secured before the jets arrive. The slow pace of Western certification has fueled speculation about political motivations. Some analysts believe Boeing and Airbus, recognizing the C919 as a real competitor, have used their influence with regulators to delay its entry. The American and European aerospace sectors represent enormous national interests. Hundreds of billions in revenue, hundreds of thousands of skilled jobs, and major export value. Allowing a Chinese-built alternative threatens industries governments have protected for generations. Even so, there are hints that the resistance may be easing. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency recently sent a delegation to Shanghai to review COMAC's production methods, quality controls, and engineering documentation. Reports from that visit indicated ESA officials were generally positive about what they observed. The agency's willingness to actively participate in the certification process, rather than indefinitely delaying, suggests European regulators acknowledge that the C919 meets core safety standards. Political factors may slow things down, but they likely can't block approval if the aircraft performs as advertised. The implications reach far beyond aviation economics. They spill over into geopolitics. For decades, commercial aircraft were one of the last major high-tech areas where Western dominance seemed secure. China could build smartphones, computers, and solar panels, but designing safe, dependable passenger jets was widely thought to be out of reach. The C919 challenges that belief. It shows that with resources, long-term planning, and persistence, China can compete in the most advanced engineering fields. This raises, some uncomfortable questions for policymakers in the United States and Europe. If China can produce competitive airliners, what sectors will follow? High-speed rail already followed this pattern. China went from importing technology to becoming the world's top exporter. Telecommunications infrastructure saw the same trajectory with Huawei and ZTE. Renewable energy technology followed suit. Commercial aviation may simply be the newest industry where China shifts from customer to challenger. For airlines, especially those in developing nations, the arrival of a viable third manufacturer is welcome news. More competition means better prices, more innovation, and improved service. With only Boeing and Airbus, airlines had limited leverage. If one couldn't meet pricing or delivery needs, the only option was the other half of the duopoly. Now, even a still emerging third option changes the negotiation landscape. The C919 also raises questions about the future of aerospace innovation. Boeing and Airbus have favored upgrading older platforms rather than creating entirely new designs. The 737 MAX traces its origins to the 1960s, updated with modern components. Airbus's A320neo follows a similar philosophy. Both companies have been reluctant to commit to clean sheet designs due to massive upfront costs. China, unhindered by legacy platforms, could leap directly to next-generation technologies, more efficient engines, lighter composites, advanced flight controls. If COMAC invests aggressively while Boeing and Airbus continue stretching older airframes, the competitive balance could shift further. The bigger question is whether China can convert early success into long-term competition. Many nations have attempted to build commercial aircraft industries: Japan, Canada, Russia, Indonesia, with only limited results. The barriers are immense: certification, development costs, global service networks, and the need to support aircraft worldwide. Boeing and Airbus spent decades building these systems. COMAC must catch up while facing entrenched players with unmatched experience, reputations, and customer loyalty. But China has advantages those previous challengers lacked: the world's second-largest economy, effectively unlimited state financial backing, a huge domestic market to absorb early challenges, and a proven ability to master complex manufacturing in other industries. These strengths suggest the C919 may be more than another failed attempt to crack the duopoly. It could genuinely mark the rise of a three-way contest, reshaping global aviation. Total Airlines' decision to acquire Chinese jets is therefore far more significant than one carrier's procurement choice. It signals a shift in how developing countries approach strategic purchases, highlights China's expanding technical capability, and challenges long-held assumptions about Western dominance in advanced manufacturing. Whether the C919 ultimately wins 5% or 25% of the global market is less important than the fact that it exists at all, a credible alternative in a space where no real choice existed for 50 years. And in an industry long controlled by two giants, that alone marks a historic turning point. The era of the duopoly may finally be fading, and the ripple effects will reach far beyond aviation into the broader race for economic and technological leadership in the 21st century.